Hello everyone, my name is Andy and welcome to my YouTube channel where I can continue to talk about Dante's Inferno. Today we have gotten to part 4 of Malebolge, the land of falsehood and fraud. So, as the title you have seen that this section is about those who try to work magic arts and sorcery and divination and all sorts of spiritual actions. Now, I could just simply tell you of what it's like, but it would be more poetic to actually read the words of Dante himself. So I'm going to go ahead and read. Of new afflictions I must now make verses, and furnish matter for the 20th canto of this first canticle of the Submerged. I was thoroughly prepared by now to seize into the depths disclosed to me that were flooded by an anguished weeping. And I saw people coming through that round ravine, silent and in tears, walking at the pace used in the litanies of this world. Yet my glance settled lower on them. Each seemed to have been monstrously reversed. Between the chin and where the chest begins, their faces now were turned to look behind, and when they walked, they had to do so backwards, for to look forward had been taken from them. It may be that once, because of palsy, someone was thus contorted, but I never saw it, nor do I think it possible. If God lets you, reader, enjoy the fruits of your reading, imagine to yourself how I could possibly have kept my eyes dry. When close to me I saw a human face, so distorted that the tears falling from its eyes bathed the buttocks where they parted, leaning on a boulder of the jagged cliff. I wept so violently that my guide said to me, "Are you another one of these fools? Whatever pity lives here is better dead. Who is more blasphemous than he who feels compassion where God's justice has prevailed? Raise your head, raise it high, and behold him, for whom under Theban eyes the earth opened," at which all shouted, "Where have you fallen, Amphiaraus? Why have you fled the battle?" And he did not stop plunging until he came to Minos, who catches every one of them. Look how he makes a breast of his shoulders, because he wished to see too far ahead. He gazes backward and advances backward. So, the punishment of those who try to see into the future are punished by only being able to see backward. Seems like a just sentence. Dante also talks about various figures that are in this section of hell that Virgil points out. The first figure that was just mentioned, his name is Amphiaraus. And if you remember back a few videos ago, the violent against God, the blasphemous, you saw a man named Capaneus who thought he was better than God, and so Jupiter struck him down by a thunderbolt. Well, from the same work, these two guys, Amphiaraus and Capaneus, were on the same side. They were two of the 7 kings who fought against the city of Thebes. Just as Capaneus was killed by Zeus for defying him, so also Amphiaraus was. Because how the story goes is that his wife told him to go into the battle, and he had foreseen in the future that he would die in the battle. So he told his son to avenge him by killing his mother if he died in battle. So he went into battle. He ran into one of those demigods. He was the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea. And he had seen into the future that this man was going to be the one to kill him. So, in order to avoid getting killed, he used his future sight and was able to prevent himself from getting killed because he knew how he was going to be killed by this guy. But as soon as he fled, Zeus got angry and threw a thunderbolt at the ground, and it opened up, cracked, and Amphiaraus fell into it, and as Dante describes, he didn't stop falling until he got to hell. and was judged and thrown into the circle. And his punishment is fitting because he tried to escape fate. He tried to see into the future to try and avoid his fate, but it only ended up getting him into worse circumstances. Other figures that appear in this area are Tiresias, very interesting character who appears in several works of mythology. He's a blind soothsayer, and the story that Dante focuses on is the fact that Tiresias, one day he sees two snakes mating, and he hits them with the stick, and the goddess Hera gets mad at him for doing that and turns him into a woman. So he's actually transgender, but actually real transgender. Sorry, but I don't think that people in our world actually can change genders. But in this story, he literally actually does become a woman, and he ends up having a daughter even when he gets pregnant and has her as a daughter. And then he runs across mating snakes again, and this time he doesn't hit the snakes, and so then he's allowed to turn back into a man. But yeah, he was a sorcerer, soothsayer, trying to see into the future, all that. And because of his sorcery, he gets thrown into this section of hell. And then also, Virgil talks about, this part's kind of interesting, he talks about his hometown. If you recall, Virgil's from a town called Mantua. This is actually a real town. Modern day it's called Mantova. And it's a peninsula that sticks out into a lake that comes from a river. While passing that place, the cruel virgin saw in the middle of the marsh some land that was untilled and bare of inhabitants. There, to escape all human company, she settled with her slaves to work her spells, and lived, and there she left behind her body. Men who scattered thereabout began to congregate in that place, which was strong because of the marshes that surrounded it. They made a city on top of those bones, and for her who first chose the place, they called it, without further auguries, Mantua. The people were already crowding it when Cassilodes' dereliction was thwarted by the fraud of Pinamonte. But I caution you, lest you should ever hear that my city had a different origin, let no such lie make pretense of the truth. So instead of choosing to do something with her life, she just decides to waste away doing her magic spells, and then rotting in the grave, and now appearing in hell. This is kind of ironic, which I've learned. I read up a little bit, and it turns out that in Virgil's Aeneid, the real version, Manto has a son, and he goes to the same place, and he names the city after his mother. But in this narrative, Virgil is saying that she was just an old spinster. So Dante's kind of changing the story a bit. So you're going to see this a lot with Dante, where it's like certain characters in mythology, he kind of puts his own spin on it, just so he can, put them in, show them in hell. Well, of course, Manto still was a sorceress either way, so she would have ended up in hell either way. But it kind of drives this point home further to show her instead as this old hag, the classical witch who lives in a swamp. There's also some real people that he talks about besides just myths. There was a guy named Michael Scott, not to be confused with Michael Scott of The Office. He was an astrologer, and he worked with divination and alchemy. And also at the same time, he ended up becoming a Catholic priest, which obviously is very diabolical, because priests oppose all sorts of acts of magic. Dante also mentions another guy named Guido Bonatti, who was an astrologer, who worked for the Ghibellines, who are Dante's political enemies. So of course he'd put one of his political enemies in his hell too. So Dante mentions a lot of different people that, unfortunately, the names don't really mean too much to us, but that's who he chose to show in here. So now let's talk about the idea of magic in and of itself. I know it depends on what kind of perspective you're coming from on how you would react to this part of hell. Because I know some people, like atheists, of course, who don't believe in magic, would just be, rolling their eyes, oh yeah, it's magic, ha 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 ha. And then on the other hand, there's people out there who are kind of the mindset of spiritual but not religious, that are kind of open to ideas like New Age and maybe open to things like Reiki and yoga and Eastern stuff like that that have to do with spirits and energy manipulation and all that. And here's the thing, the Catholic perspective, the perspective that I come from, is that even the devil, especially the devil, is spiritual. So things that are spiritual, if you say, oh, I'm a spiritual person, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good kind of spirit, because there are good spirits and there are bad spirits. Good spirits are God and his angels, who are the evil spirits, Satan and his angels, fallen. The thing is that there's a certain pride with doing magic, because it's claiming to have a special power that is given to you, but it goes against the nature of how God created things to work. It's contrary to nature, because God did not reveal the spiritual realm to us except through his word. And so witches and diviners and astrologers and all that, they're going into the forbidden territory. And if it's going into the forbidden territory, then it's going against God's wishes. And if you go against God's wishes, well, you're not going to get help from God. Most likely not. And if your help, the spiritual power, has to come from somewhere. Well, if it can't come from God, it has to come from Satan. So things like Reiki and even stuff like yoga, I think nowadays people have kind of taken an attitude to yoga where they say, okay, well, I'm just doing it for the exercise. I can see the argument for that, except here's the problem. Specifically with yoga, the actual Hindu yoga masters will tell you that the physical part of the yoga, that it really, you can't separate it from the spiritual. If you think about, every yoga pose actually represents one of the Hindu gods. And so the reason why it's called yoga is that you're yoking yourself, you're kind of attaching yourself to this spirit, this god. And that's why yoga can be dangerous. It's not like the action of you moving your hand in a certain position, like if I happen to do like this position, it's gonna oh no, I'm gonna be possessed now. If you're doing it unconsciously, then it's probably not gonna be like a problem. But if you actually you're purposely doing this, you're inviting demons, because the gods of other religions other than Christianity, the gods are actually demons. And we know this by reading scripture, like the gods of all the Gentiles, all the non-Jews in the Old Testament, those are all the spirits of demons. And many Israelites got possessed by them because they broke God's commandment and worshiped those other false gods. Very widely used example of the evil of sorcery is when King Saul, king of Israel, he was anointed by God to be king, and he gets to a point where he's so desperate that he goes to see a witch to solve his problem. So here I'm going to read what happens. Now Samuel had died. Now Samuel is a great prophet who used to give advice to Saul. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. When Saul had put the mediums and the wizards out of the land, the Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams, or by Urim, or by the prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, Seek out for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servants said to him, Behold, there is a medium at Endor. So Saul disguised himself, and put on other garments, and went, he and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, Divine for me a spirit, and bring up for me whomever I shall name to you. The woman said to him, Surely you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the wizards from the land. Why then are you laying a snare for my life to bring about my death? But Saul swore to her by the Lord, As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, Whom shall I bring up for you? He said, Bring up Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out in a loud voice, and the woman said to Saul, Why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, Have no fear. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a god coming out of the earth. He said to her, What is his appearance? And she said, An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed his face to the ground and did obeisance. Then Samuel said to Saul, Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Saul answered, I am in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or dreams. Therefore I have summoned you to tell me what I should do. And Samuel said, Why then do you ask me, since the Lord has turned from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done to you as he spoke by me. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor, David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will give Israel also with you into the land of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me. The Lord will give the army of Israel also into the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell at once full length upon the ground, filled with fear because of the words of Samuel, and there was no strength in him, for he had eaten nothing all day and night. So he goes to consult the dead, getting advice from Samuel, who's dead, through using the power of spirit medium to try and solve his problems. But it only gets worse because of that. And that's the nature of using magic users. You try to get healed by it, but it ends up making it worse because the devil lies. He's a liar. And if you use his power, it's never going to come to good in the end. Now, in this passage, it's kind of interesting. A lot of Protestants will look at that passage and they'll say, okay, well, the one who came could not have been Samuel because God is not with the medium. The medium is, working with the devil, to conjure up someone who looks like Samuel. But I've read an article on Catholic Answers that kind of helped me see the other side of it, is that even with the spirit medium doing this evil action of invoking the devil's power to bring forth someone, God chose in this situation to intervene and actually show the real Samuel. But this is a rare occurrence, and it's only an act of mercy towards Saul that God allows this to even happen. God could have made it even worse and just allowed the spirit medium to bring forth a demon that looks like Samuel. And that could be also another case, but we don't really know for sure. But in any case, it's wrong, even if you think that all hope is lost. Turning to spiritual methods that are against God are only going to hurt you more. And the magicians, witches, and spirit mediums and all that, even if they may not realize it, what they're doing, it's a sort of, the way what I've read is that it's like being a spiritual prostitute in a way, because we are created by God and we belong to him alone. and only his power can heal us, whether working through other people, like say doctors, or through supernatural means. But if we try to get power from the devil, it's only going to hurt us. And that's what spirit mediums and wizards and witches, they espouse themselves not to the true spirit, God, but to the evil spirits, Satan and his minions. I know another question's going to come up, so I'm just going to bring it up. The issue about Harry Potter. People are going to ask me, okay, so are you against Harry Potter? And I'm going to say, no, I'm not actually against Harry Potter. I know there's a lot of people on both sides of this issue. This issue is the Catholic Church does not take a stance specifically on Harry Potter because it's a novel left up to your judgment. But the way that I see it, I've actually read all the Harry Potter books, and I've seen that all the people who argue against Harry Potter are usually those who have not read it. And especially hearing from exorcists like Father Ripperger, whom I respect, and of course all exorcists, they are invaluable men. They see a lot of really horrible things having to deal with actual demons. And I mean, demons are like, they're real. And exorcists, they deal with it. Harry Potter, on the other hand, people could go off the deep end and take it too far, but the material in and of itself, all the spells are just literally just Latin words. So there's no like magical power in it. And even Wiccans, actual witches themselves, have testified that it's like, oh, it doesn't really match like what we do at all. So it's not that, and in matter of fact, it has a lot of Christianity in it, I would say. So there's a lot of evidence that Harry Potter is actually a very good story. I would go so far as to say that it's even reached a level of classic literature, although Father Ripperger just says it's just a bunch of crap. I guess he doesn't have an eye for certain types of beauty. Anyways, it's just his opinion that it's crappy work. And then also another objection people have is that Harry is rewarded for doing bad things, and that really isn't the case. Just because a character does, if like the main character does something bad, it doesn't necessarily mean that the author is condoning what the character is doing. So that's not really a good argument. I've heard all the arguments, and I've been back and forth on this issue, and I've come to the conclusion that Harry Potter is okay. But you should remember not to take it too far, not to actually try to do magic, and you don't want to risk it. I don't really have much to offer, just stating exactly what Christians believe on this subject. And so I guess have a good day, stay out of hell, and don't resort to any method of witchcraft, magic, or Tai Chi, or anything involving like spiritual energy.